At exactly 3:02 p.m. local time, the Caribbean Sea appears almost unnervingly calm. The sky is clear, the water is smooth, disturbed only by the steady white trail of a lone U.S. Navy vessel moving lawfully through international waters. At first glance, nothing seems out of place. No storms, no nearby civilian traffic, just open blue water stretching endlessly to the horizon. Inside the ship, though, the atmosphere is completely different. In the Combat Information Center, radar operators are already focused on something unusual. 5 surface contacts appear on the screen almost at the same moment. They are not scattered. They are not random. They emerge together from the same sector, traveling at nearly identical speeds. That alone is enough to raise concern. Within seconds, the tracks are marked, numbered, and enlarged. Their outlines are clear. Naval hulls, military profiles, Venezuelan ships. The officer of the watch leans closer to the display. None of the vessels are broadcasting AIS signals. No commercial identification, no routine navigation data. They are moving with purpose, maintaining formation, and steadily closing the distance. This is not ordinary traffic. The bridge is notified. The captain is informed. From this moment on, every movement will be logged, time-stamped, and preserved. The American ship holds its course and speed. At 3:06 p.m., the Venezuelan vessels shift heading, only by a few degrees at first, subtle enough that a civilian crew might overlook it. But this is not a civilian watch team. The change is noticed immediately. Their new course is converging. On the bridge, binoculars come up. Long-range cameras turn toward the contacts. One by one, the 5 ships come into clear view. Gray hulls, forward-mounted naval guns, deck crews visible, 5 Venezuelan naval vessels. 1 American ship, still no radio calls, no warnings, just movement. In the CIC, the range rings begin to tighten. Closest point of approach is calculated automatically. 3 nautical miles, then less. If nothing changes, this will become a close pass, the kind that leaves no room for confusion. Standard procedure begins. A bridge-to-bridge hail is transmitted on open maritime frequencies. Unidentified naval vessels, this is a United States Navy ship operating in international waters. State your intentions. No reply. The call is repeated, this time in Spanish. Silence. At 3:10 p.m., one of the Venezuelan ships increases speed, then another. Their formation subtly changes shape, no longer running parallel but angled inward. It is an approach pattern naval officers recognize immediately. This is pressure. Even so, the U.S. ship does not maneuver. No sudden turns, no burst of speed, no visible escalation. The standing orders are clear. Remain predictable, remain professional, and do nothing that could be seen as provocation. Inside the ship, systems quietly shift into a higher state of readiness. Radar modes are adjusted. Electro-optical sensors lock on. Electronic warfare systems begin passive collection, recording every signal coming from the approaching ships. Nothing is announced over the shipwide system. No alarms sound. The crew does not need them. They can feel it in the silence, in the way every voice drops lower, in the way each order is spoken once and carried out immediately. At 3:14 p.m., the distance closes again. 5 Venezuelan naval vessels are now well within visual maneuvering range, moving fast and aligned on an intercept course that leaves little doubt about intent. This is not an accident. This is not a misunderstanding. From the outside, it may look like a simple meeting at sea. 2 navies on open water. No shots, no dramatic signals. But on the bridge of the U.S. Navy ship, everyone understands the truth. When 5 naval vessels close in together at speed without communication, there is nothing routine about it. And whatever happens next will be measured not in minutes, but in seconds. By 3:18 p.m., the gap between the 2 sides is shrinking quickly. On the surface, nothing dramatic has happened yet. No flares, no warning fire, no heated radio exchange. But at sea, pressure is rarely loud. It builds quietly, measured in knots, bearings, and closing angles. The 5 Venezuelan ships accelerate again. Their wakes stretch longer behind them as their engines push harder. This is no longer passive maneuvering. It is deliberate acceleration, coordinated across the formation. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tracking picture updates in real time. Speed increasing, heading converging. Closest point of approach now below 2 nautical miles and still dropping. That number matters. At this distance, even a slight course change can be read as aggression. Even a small mistake could bring steel into contact with steel. The margin for error is gone. The U.S. Navy ship answers in the same way it always does, by doing nothing sudden. The bridge maintains steady course and speed. Every action remains measured and predictable. The captain understands the logic of encounters like this. Escalation favors the side that reacts emotionally. Control belongs to the side that does not. Another bridge-to-bridge hail is transmitted. Venezuelan naval vessels. This is a United States Navy ship. You are closing distance at high speed. Alter course immediately. Again, no response. In the CIC, passive sensors detect a change. One of the Venezuelan ships switches radar modes. It is subtle but unmistakable. The signal shifts from broad surface search to a narrower tracking pattern. They are no longer simply observing. They are actively tracking the ship's position, speed, and bearing. That distinction matters. It marks the difference between watching and signaling intent. The information is logged immediately. Time, frequency, bearing, every detail is captured. The crew stays calm, but the tension deepens. At 3:22 p.m., the Venezuelan formation tightens. Two ships drift slightly outward while the lead pair holds the center line. The fifth trails behind, offset to starboard. On the bridge, it is recognized for what it is, a textbook pressure formation. Long-range optics zoom in tighter. Deck crews are clearly visible now, helmets on. Personnel positioned near gun mounts, no systems visibly manned, but no one aboard the American ship mistakes this for routine behavior. The captain gives a brief order. Prepare non-lethal deterrents. This is not escalation, it is a signal. Below deck, systems shift again. Cameras continue recording without interruption. Electronic warfare suites keep collecting passively. Every signal from the other side, every radar pulse, every data burst is being captured and stored. This is how modern naval confrontations often unfold. Not through immediate firepower, but through control, discipline, and evidence. At 3:25 p.m., the distance closes to less than 1.5 nautical miles. At that range, hull markings are easy to read. Through high-powered optics, even faces on deck become clear. The ocean itself seems to feel tighter, as if there's no longer space left for maneuver. Still, the U.S. Navy ship holds steady. To someone watching from afar, it might look like restraint. But to professionals, it's something else entirely. Control through discipline. Sudden moves create uncertainty. Uncertainty leads to mistakes, and mistakes turn into consequences no one can undo. One of the Venezuelan ships briefly accelerates, then steadies again. A test, a moment meant to provoke a reaction. To see if the American ship will flinch, it doesn't. At 3:27 p.m., a decision is made. Air control is notified. The flight deck is cleared. A new element is about to enter the situation, one that shifts the balance without changing the rules. Because when pressure builds on the surface, the next message often comes from above. Under the bright Caribbean sun reflecting off gray hulls and white wakes, one thing becomes clear to everyone involved. This is no longer just 5 ships confronting one. It's about who controls the situation and who loses that control first. By 3:29 p.m., the dynamic begins to change. Up to now, everything has played out at sea level. Ships, formations, distances measured in fractions of a mile. Now, a new dimension is added. From the deck of the U.S. Navy ship, a Seahawk helicopter lifts smoothly into the air. No rush, no dramatic movement, just a steady ascent as its rotors cut through the warm, humid air. It turns toward the 5 Venezuelan vessels below. This isn't an attack aircraft, it's presence. The helicopter picks up speed, flying low, just a few hundred feet above the water, parallel to the formation. Its systems activate immediately. High-resolution cameras, infrared sensors, precision range finding. Everything is being recorded. Inside the aircraft, the crew stays focused and quiet. Their role isn't to threaten, it's to observe, document, and send a message without a single shot. Below, the Venezuelan ships maintain course. The formation holds. No radio calls, no acknowledgement. But subtle changes begin to appear. Crew members shift positions. Heads tilt upward. Binoculars are raised. They see it. At 3:31 p.m., the Seahawk stabilizes at a safe distance, circling just outside the formation. Close enough to be unmistakable, far enough to remain professional. Its cameras zoom in on the lead ship's bridge. Faces come into view. Heat signatures show clearly through the glass. Every second is tagged with time and location, stored with precision. This isn't intimidation, it's documentation. Back aboard the U.S. Navy ship, the live feed streams into the Combat Information Center. Analysts track every detail: crew movement, ship markings, sensor activity. Each piece adds to the record. Then comes a clear signal. A green laser briefly activates from the helicopter. Non-lethal, harmless, but impossible to miss. The beam touches the forward section of the lead Venezuelan vessel, then moves deliberately toward the bridge windows. A message understood by every Navy in the world. We see you. We are recording. You are accountable. Moments later, the helicopter crew transmits on open frequency. Venezuelan naval vessels, this is a United States Navy aircraft. You are operating unsafely in international waters. Alter course immediately. The message is repeated in Spanish. Still no response. But something changes. Electronic sensors aboard the U.S. ship pick up new activity. One Venezuelan vessel briefly boosts its radar output, likely attempting to track the helicopter. That too is recorded. At 3:34 p.m., the closest ship reaches its minimum distance, less than 1 nautical mile. The tightest moment of the encounter. The point where even a small error could lead to contact. The Seahawk adjusts slightly, its movement smooth and controlled. Never aggressive, never abrupt. Just steady, constant, impossible to ignore. Below, the Venezuelan formation begins to lose its precision. One ship's wake shortens. Its speed drops slightly. Then another adjustment follows elsewhere in the group. The once perfect alignment starts to shift. Commanders are reassessing. They now face a new reality. Any further move forward will be captured in sharp detail, with time and location locked in. Any unsafe action will exist permanently, ready to be reviewed, replayed, and shared far beyond these waters. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy ship continues exactly as before. No change in course, no visible escalation, no threats, and yet the pressure grows heavier. Because escalation doesn't always come from force. Sometimes it comes from control. At 3:37 p.m., the situation reaches a turning point. 5 ships, 1 helicopter, 1 steady American vessel. For the first time, the question shifts from how close the Venezuelan ships can get to how much farther they're willing to go. At 3:38 p.m., something finally changes. No sudden movement, no dramatic commands, no loud signals, just a subtle shift. For nearly 40 minutes, the U.S. Navy ship has done the same thing. Held course, held speed, held discipline. Overhead, the helicopter continues its calm orbit. Cameras still recording, presence firmly established. Now, the Venezuelan ships begin to adjust. It starts with the lead vessel. At first, the change is almost invisible. Its wake shortens slightly, then more clearly. Speed drops by a couple of knots. To an untrained eye, it might seem insignificant. To the officers watching, it means everything. The first ship has backed off. Seconds later, a second vessel alters course, just enough to break the clean intercept line. The formation loses its sharp symmetry. The coordinated pressure begins to ease. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tracking lines update. The closest point of approach increases again. That number matters just as much now as it did before. The Seahawk maintains position. No need to move closer. No need to withdraw. Its job is already done. The presence is clear. The record is complete. By 3:41 p.m., a third Venezuelan ship reduces speed. Crew members step back from forward positions. Activity near the gun mounts slows. No one raises a weapon. No one needs to. From the bridge of the U.S. Navy ship, the message has already been understood. The captain watches through the optics without saying a word. There is no sign of triumph, no visible reaction at all. Professionalism demands the same composure in a favorable moment as it does under pressure. The Venezuelan formation begins to lose its shape. One ship eases slightly to port, opening space. Another falls back, widening the gap between vessels. What had looked like a coordinated advance now starts to feel like a series of separate decisions, careful, measured, and fully aware of the consequences. Still, no radio call comes, and that silence says more than words could. At 3:44 p.m., the Seahawk makes its final recording pass. The helicopter banks gently, climbing just enough to clear the formation before turning back toward the American ship. The cameras continue recording until the very last moment. Every angle, every course adjustment, every drop in speed. This is more than documentation. It is the closing act of the encounter. On the surface, the U.S. Navy ship remains exactly as it has been from the start. Steady, unchanged, unshaken. It has not given up a single inch of international water. It has not answered pressure with force. It has not reacted emotionally. It has simply held its ground. By 3:46 p.m., the Venezuelan ships are no longer moving on an intercept path. Their headings begin to separate. The distance between hulls increases. The encounter, at least as one side intended it, is over. 5 warships approached at speed. 5 warships depart without a shot being fired. This is not a retreat in the dramatic sense. No flags are lowered, no distress calls are made, but in naval terms, the result is unmistakable. Pressure was applied. Pressure was answered, and one side chose to break away. The U.S. Navy ship continues on its original heading, wake unchanged, engines steady, as though nothing unusual has happened. Because for the crew on board, this was never about winning a confrontation. It was about controlling it. And in the gray zones of modern naval operations, control, not firepower alone, is often what determines the outcome. By 3:50 p.m., the Caribbean looks calm again. The 5 Venezuelan ships are still visible on the horizon, but their courses no longer cross the path of the American vessel. With each passing minute, the distance grows, mile by mile, moment by moment. No alarms sound. No further hails are exchanged. The encounter is over, but the event itself is not finished. Inside the U.S. ship, the most important work begins only after separation. Radar logs are archived. Sensor footage is reviewed and organized. Electronic emissions gathered throughout the encounter are time-stamped, verified, and cross-checked. Every course change, every speed shift, every moment of silence. In modern naval operations, documentation is just as important as maneuvering. What happens at sea does not remain at sea. It becomes part of a permanent record, one that can be replayed, analyzed, and presented at every level, from operational briefings to diplomatic discussions. And this is where the meaning of the encounter becomes unmistakable. The Venezuelan warships approached aggressively, at speed, without communication, and within close maneuvering distance. Those actions were captured in full. When pressure was answered legally, visibly, and without force, the approach stopped. No shots were fired. No unlawful move came from the U.S. Navy ship. No rules were broken on its side. And that matters. From a strategic standpoint, the disengagement was not random. It was the result of narrowing options. Continuing the approach would have meant pushing further into a fully documented, unsafe maneuver in international waters, one difficult to explain away. Turning off that path avoided that result. This is the logic of modern gray zone competition at sea. Navies rarely seek open confrontation. Instead, they test limits. They probe reactions. They apply pressure just below the threshold of direct conflict, hoping to gain an advantage without triggering wider consequences. But pressure works both ways. The U.S. response followed a doctrine shaped over decades. Remain predictable, remain professional, and allow the other side to reveal its intent. Once that intent becomes visible, it becomes a liability. By refusing to overreact, the American ship denied its counterparts the one thing they may have wanted most, an emotional response that could be portrayed as provocation. Instead, the record shows restraint, and restraint, when backed by capability, is not weakness. It is leverage. The helicopter did not threaten. The ship did not maneuver aggressively. The crew did not escalate. Yet the outcome favored the side that stayed calm. As the distance widens, the crew returns to routine watches. The helicopter is secured. The flight deck grows quiet again. To an outside observer, it might seem as though nothing especially important took place. But for naval professionals, this encounter becomes a study in how presence, discipline, and documentation can settle a confrontation without a single round fired. It shows how control of escalation, not firepower alone, defines success in contested waters. And it sends a message far beyond the Caribbean. International waters are governed by law, not intimidation. Professional conduct leaves a record. And every action at sea carries consequences, whether immediate or delayed. The U.S. Navy ship continues its transit, unchanged in course, unchanged in mission. Ahead, the sea remains wide and indifferent. Behind it, 5 warships fade farther into the distance. No winner is announced. No defeat is declared. But the record tells its own story. In the modern maritime world, the strongest move is often the one that makes no sound at all.